A while back I was thinking of making a Reddit iceberg, but I recently came across this one, so I thought I may as well just cover this one for now. It mainly focuses on specific posts, so let me know if you still want me to make one at some point that has posts, users, subreddits, events and whatever else. Apologies for the lack of a proper intro. I ended up rearranging what future videos were coming out when, and I've been ill so I haven't had time to film new intros. Also, sorry if my voice sounds even worse than normal, that's also why. Credit to user CheemsGyaru for creating this iceberg. They even went to the trouble of linking most of the posts so you don't have to go hunting for them all. One of the entries, the foster parents' hidden camera, didn't have a link though, and I wasn't able to find it, so I had to miss that one out. But if anyone has a link, please leave it in the comments. If you've been on Reddit for a while, you've probably heard some of the earlier entries, but there are some pretty obscure ones that I hadn't heard of further down, so hopefully this will provide you with some new rabbit holes to explore. Anyway, this video will contain vague discussions of a variety of disturbing and potentially triggering topics. Viewer discretion is advised. You can head over to my Patreon for an uncut version of this video, which features extra disturbing details that were too graphic to include in this cut. Before we get onto the iceberg, this video is sponsored by Hunter Killer, a monthly murder mystery subscription box where you get to be the detective. Let's be honest, January is probably the worst month of the year. The excitement of Christmas is over and it's the beginning of a long, boring wait until summer. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom though, and I can't think of a more exciting way to pass the time than by solving a mystery. With Hunter Killer, you can get one sent right to your doorstep with evidence, documents like police reports, audio recordings, and other physical items to immerse you in the story and help you solve the case. You'll be investigating the death of Beth Ferris Hendricks, which was ruled an accident, though her sister Gwen believes she was murdered. It'll be your job to examine clues, decode ciphers, and solve puzzles to help her uncover the secrets of Mallory Rock and catch the killer. The subscription box will give you something to look forward to every month, but they also have various one-off mysteries and box sets available too, which would be perfect for a game night with friends. Part of the proceeds from every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, so you'll be supporting the resolution of real cold cases while solving fictional ones from the comfort of your own home. Right now you can get $10 off your order if you go to hunterkiller.com/internet investigators and enter code INTERNET. That's hunterkiller.com/internet investigators and code INTERNET for $10 off your purchase. The post linked in the iceberg was on the Tip of My Joystick subreddit in December 2018 and read, "There was this game I used to have downloaded in about 2006 before I upgraded my computer and lost it. It was a farming, Stardew Valley style of game where you murder your wife and then you try and pretend that you never killed her, and that was the whole game. Keep farming and make sure no one finds out you killed her. There was fishing minigame and I specifically remember fishing up evidence of your wife's murder and then you pass out. Edit, it wasn't pretending to be a kids game, it was an RPG maker and I got it off some indie dev's website. There were screens between each day that showed the date in the game, and one of the characters was an old dude with a white beard. This wasn't the first time the game was discussed on Reddit though, as 3 years earlier a user described a very similar plot and remembered playing the game sometime between 2000 and 2015, though couldn't remember what console they were using. They did remember that it wasn't a browser game. The mystery gained traction when Wang and Nexpo uploaded videos on it, but no one could identify the game for quite some time until a few months ago. Turns out the game likely doesn't exist, and the first OP's memories were actually caused by a Vinesauce video that they'd seen, and it sparked a dream that they thought were real, or they hallucinated it due to lack of sleep or the medication they were taking at the time, or they merged it in their mind with Harvest Moon. As for the OP of the more recent post, perhaps they too saw the Vinesauce video, or maybe they saw the initial post and it produced a false memory that they'd actually played it. Or maybe such a game does exist and just hasn't been found yet. Regardless, it doesn't sound like the first OP played it, and that mystery is solved at least. Prepare for things to take a dark and grisly turn. This post was made by a father who noticed that his usually happy and energetic dog, Colby, recently seemed off, so he took him to the vets and was shocked to find out Colby had damage to a certain area that indicated someone tried to have inappropriate contact with him. For some reason, he suspected his son was responsible and so decided to check his computer, on which he found not safe for work content involving animals. When confronted about Colby, the son seemed uncomfortable but denied it at first and was outraged that his dad had checked his computer until he eventually admitted it. Therapy clearly didn't help the son, as just 2 months later it happened again, and he was caught in the act this time. The father decided against telling his wife the first time, only mentioning it after the second time when it was clear that Colby would need to be rehomed. This obviously caused an argument, and it led to the wife eventually coming to the conclusion that it must have been the father who had the inappropriate contact with Colby, and that he must have blamed it on his son to cover his tracks. The son saw this as a way out and threw his dad under the bus, who moved in with a friend, unwillingly leaving Colby with his attacker. Sometime later, the father received a call from his wife telling him their son was in hospital getting stitches after the dog bit him. It seemed that Colby had finally snapped and retaliated, and she finally realised it was the son all along. Their marriage was damaged irreparably though, and the dad took Colby and left for good. He didn't speak to his son for years and later updated Reddit saying Colby sadly died of old age, and he still has contact with his son, but they don't talk about what happened. The mum apparently lost her job, then took a turn for the worst. He didn't know the details but heard rumours of drugs and, quote, certain favours. He's doing much better in general and met a new woman who he's been with for a few years now. This entry is a pretty widespread internet mystery, not just a single Reddit post. I won't spend too much time on it because so many videos on it already exist, like Nexpo and Barely Sociables. But to summarise, Kutchie's Key West Cafe was a cafe in Asheville, North Carolina, USA, that shut down in 2005 to 2006, but sometime after, someone began posting thousands of reviews online, on blogs, news articles, cooking sites and more. The reviews praised the restaurant and talked about how great the key lime pie is, but there were also odd and sometimes inappropriate references in them. Many of the posts were made by a Jake Carson, but there were many other accounts, all posting very similar reviews. It was initially theorised that bots were responsible, but there were countless accounts on websites that required verified emails or captures. If you like this mystery, you might also like a similar but lesser known one involving Reddit user MSys006. I did a whole video on that, so I'll leave a link in the description. If you've been on Reddit for a while, or if you watch Wang's videos, no two words will make you feel more uncomfortable than broken arms. You lucky, sheltered individuals who don't know what I'm talking about, there was a post in 2011 by a user who broke his arms in an accident at the age of 14, and his 37-year-old mother tried to help him by starting an inappropriate relationship with him. I'm not going into detail here, you can find the post pretty easily, but his father was aware of it and didn't mind. They all feel it was a positive experience overall, and they were even involved in a study on those kind of relationships where those involved were not traumatised. With most sickening Reddit posts like this, you can at least convince yourself it's a troll who's fabricating a story, but this one was actually verified with the mods. It's 100% true. Year Video Games was a Reddit user who posted variations of the phrase Ubisoft goes Steamworks bye bye, always on DRM, and strange photos until he was banned. It started in September 2010 when he commented on a post about Oblivion mods with the following: the uninstall button. The game is great and all that, but god is it hard to fully remove all the junk it leaves behind on your system. You really need to check out that mod when the time comes to get rid of it. Otherwise, I think Oscuro's Oblivion overhaul is a nice start. When someone asked him to elaborate, he replied, the uninstall button. The game is great, Ubisoft goes Steamworks bye bye, always on DRM, but you oft go work, always on work, DR. Check out the junk it leaves behind in you. He then spammed the thread with the phrase and went on to make around 4,000 posts and comments with that exact line, as well as images of the phrase handwritten and other surreal photos. Eventually it was determined that Year Video Games was likely suffering with psychosis, and he'd had some serious physical health problems as well as dealing with childhood trauma. Tragically, in 2019, a friend of his revealed that he had taken his own life 4 years prior. In reply to an Ask Reddit post nearly 8 years ago, if a crime happened at your home, what would be the most embarrassing thing the cops would find while investigating? One user commented, my poop scissors, no clarification needed. Another user pointed out that clarification definitely was needed, and so Opie explained that when he was younger, his bowel movements were infrequent, and when he did go, there'd be so much that it would block the toilet, which obviously annoyed his parents. So he found a strong pair of scissors to chop it up each time to make it flushable. Sounds like he didn't bother to wash them after each use, as he said they were soon covered in excrement. Why do I feel like this guy probably also has a toe knife? The Jolly Rancher story extends way outside of Reddit. Some variations seem to have done the rounds in many secondary schools in America, here in the UK, but it was Skittles as I remember, and probably other countries too. I don't know when it was first told on Reddit, but basically, a couple were having a bit of adult fun while eating Jolly Ranchers. One of them went where it shouldn't, the guy pulled it out and ate it. It wasn't a Jolly Rancher, that's all I'm saying. Many years ago, a Redditor revealed the secret that could ruin his life if it came out. For 2 to 3 years, he filled a shoebox with certain bodily fluids and eventually tried to set it on fire for some unknown reason, but it just sizzled and didn't actually catch fire. He took photos to prove it and was even kind enough to update the comment with a new photo when mold started growing inside of it. The coconut is a similar story, only it was a coconut rather than a shoebox, and maggots started growing inside it. I actually covered this Reddit user in my recent video on the penectomy subreddit, so feel free to check that out for a more in-depth summary of the story, but basically this guy was delusional and ended up removing his own bits because he thought God wanted him to. He deteriorated to a point where he thought God wanted him to die, and so it seems that he took his own life. The R4R subreddit is a community for meeting other Redditors for various purposes, whether you're looking for a friend, a pen pal, a fellow student, or even a date. A man named Eric once posted there trying to arrange a get-together where he would buy everyone pizza, and he received a reply from a woman named Annie who said she lived too far away to go, but that she'd still like to be friends with him. Because she was in a relationship, she specified that she didn't want to talk in DMs and preferred to chat in the comments. There were countless replies on that first post, but they went on to create other threads where they would have conversations consisting of thousands and thousands of comments. Although their relationship started out platonic, it clearly began to grow into something more. At some point, Annie broke up with her partner, but her and Eric continued to talk publicly. He mentioned a couple of women he'd dated over the time they'd been talking to each other, and this didn't seem to bother Annie at first, though eventually it got to her and she suddenly explained that she didn't want to continue whatever they had going on because she was jealous. Eric tried to change her mind, but she was set on this being the end for them and eventually stopped replying. Eric, seemingly heartbroken, kept posting about Annie and responding to her old comments, sometimes as if she was still there. His posts were quite depressing, and when he failed to post for some time, it was speculated that he may have taken his own life, but he made one final comment years later that had nothing to do with Annie, so he was at least still alive at that point and hopefully moved on from the situation. As for Annie, it's anyone's guess what happened to her when she stopped posting. Lake City Quiet Pills is regarded by many as the greatest mystery on Reddit, perhaps one of the greatest on the whole internet. It began in July 2009 with the death of user Religion of Peace, who was a moderator of the now-banned subreddit Jailbait and operator of LakeCityQuietPills.com, a site that featured similar inappropriate content. To cut a long story short, strange messages were found hidden in the HTML of his website and in comments posted by the user who had announced his death. The most popular theory is that Quiet Pills means bullets, and the website was used for a group of hitmen to keep in touch and arrange assassinations. Swamps of Dagobah is a story posted by a nurse who had to deal with a patient that had a perirectal abscess due to meth use. They describe what happened in painful detail, so I'd recommend checking out the comment itself if you can stomach it. But let's just say it ends with fluids everywhere and hospital staff traumatised for life. Yet another story of a Redditor putting their bits in places they don't belong. He got it stuck in a full bottle of shampoo, it burned and caused damage, but the OP posted as recently as 6 months ago, so he survived at least. The lamp story comes from a comment 10 years ago where a man talks about how he was once assaulted and became unconscious. He woke up and met a woman who he eventually married and had children with, and everything was perfect until one day he noticed something wasn't right with the lamp. He stared at it for days until his wife got seriously worried and took the kids, and he soon realised none of it was real. He woke up after the accident and realised he hallucinated the whole experience, which sent him into a deep depression as he grieved for his family that never even existed. There's a lot of debate over whether this story is true and whether it's even plausible, but the possibility of it has always terrified me. Ready to ask for advice after something, I don't even know how to describe it, let alone do I want to, came out during her. Some users pointed out it looked like bacon, so she decided to fry it, said it smelled delicious, but thankfully didn't eat it. In May 2013, a concerned user posted on their Off My Chest subreddit explaining that his mother had poisoned him to try and stop him leaving home. Her and his sister always became hostile when he tried to get a job and move out, and he suspected they might have interfered with his last job, leading to him being let go. When he left for his new job, his mother gave him some noodles and kept calling him to ask if he'd eaten them yet. When he did, he started to feel ill, the same way he'd felt after his sister fed him something a couple of years earlier. Hoping he was just being paranoid, he ordered a kit to test for cyanide and it came back positive. Needless to say, he cut contact with his family, but police weren't able to do anything because the food had been opened, so they couldn't prove it was the family. Jason in Hell was a 30-year-old man who asked Reddit for advice after his wife cheated on him with their neighbour. He stayed with her for the sake of their children, but shortly before making the post had changed his mind and wanted out. A couple of weeks later, he filed for divorce, and the next morning his wife killed their 2 children while he was asleep in the basement to prevent him from getting custody. She was arrested and sentenced to life in prison, and Jason eventually made an update post in which he said he was doing better every day, though it had taken a lot for him to get to that point. 9-year-old Scott Cleashulte went missing in 1979 after leaving his home in St. Charles, Missouri in the evening. He was last seen walking around before and after a heavy thunderstorm hit the area, and despite extensive searches, no trace of him was ever found, and it was assumed he either drowned in a flash flood or was abducted. So what does this case have to do with Reddit? Well, a few years ago, a confession was posted on an Ask Reddit thread in which the OP claimed to have been present, if not partly responsible, for a boy's death when he was a child. OP and his friends were playing out when they saw the boy hanging around their spot. He started throwing sticks at them and they started making their way up when he somehow fell from a height and was lying on the ground in an awkward position with blood coming out of his nose. Whether or not that boy was Scott is a matter of speculation, as is the validity of the comment itself. Though if it is true, the OP clearly underestimated the sleuths of Reddit when he decided to post it, and it's all since been deleted. This is exactly what it sounds like. A man was involved in a motorbike accident, and while his foot was salvaged, he was unable to walk on it, so decided to have it amputated, then cooked and ate it with his friends. He posted photos of the foot tacos and his stump as proof. Here we have another worrying confession, this time through a meme though. Are ready to confess to killing their sister's boyfriend with their own meth, Walter White style. Within minutes of posting, they were doxxed and reported to the FBI, and they soon claimed it was just a joke, though there was some truth behind it. They wouldn't say what. It's not clear how much, if any of it was true, but some were particularly suspicious of OP after they deleted their account. This is another murder confession, albeit a much more credible one. 22-year-old Melinda Vasilij was found dead in her apartment in 2017, and around that time, a post was made on Reddit by her ex-boyfriend, who claimed to have entered her apartment, hoping to reconcile, and got into a physical altercation with her where she was lashing out with a knife. In self-defense, he got a knife and ended up stabbing her a few times, then leaving, not realizing she died until the next day. I couldn't find much information on what happened after he was caught and the trial began, but general consensus seems to be that he didn't act in self-defense, and the Reddit post was a final attempt at covering his tracks, or at least reducing his inevitable prison sentence. The Butcher is the name of a short film that Heredita remembered seeing on Nickelodeon between 2001 and 2004, though the plot doesn't sound very child-friendly. It was in black and white, there was no dialogue, only music, and Opie recalls a hand with a knife butchering small animals made out of real bones inside glasses, and bones fused together to make an abomination. When Opie posted on the Lost Media subreddit, the National Film Board of Canada looked through their archives and linked a video that was the closest they could find, but unfortunately it wasn't a match. This lost film gained more attention when Blame It on Jorge covered it in a video, and Heredita found a film titled Butcher's Hook, which Opie was 90% sure was the film they'd seen, but they needed to confirm that it was broadcast on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network because they didn't remember every scene. This all happened over a year ago, but it doesn't sound like Opie was able to verify it. The story of the Whistler was told on an Ask Reddit thread titled, "What is the creepiest thing that has actually happened to you?" At about the age of 8, the Opie and his mum were walking their dog around the neighbourhood at night when they passed near a wooded swampy area and heard someone whistling at them. The mum was clearly concerned and a bit terrified and said they should go home quickly. A couple of years later, Opie heard the whistler again while walking his dog. He went home and it didn't happen again until he was 24, watching the fireworks with his girlfriend by the Missouri River, which was over 600 miles away from where he grew up and had first heard the whistling. Most people had left the area, it was getting dark and a storm was moving in. Someone was in a canoe around 20 metres offshore, and when Opie's girlfriend went to grab more beers from the car, the person started whistling at Opie, in the same two-tone tune he'd heard before. He stood up and shouted, asking who the person was, but got no reply. They just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe around and paddled away. Opie was filming the fireworks and so caught some of the whistling on camera, though it was as the person was paddling away, so it's hard to make them out. The video could have been faked, but it sparked comments from many others recalling similar stories. Either way, it's absolutely terrifying. The most captivating stories on Reddit are those that you can watch develop over time, just like the story of Eric and Annie. Another example is the story of Spontaneous H, who posted after trying heroin for the first time, saying it was the most euphoric experience he'd ever had, but he didn't want to get addicted, so vowed not to try it again. Obviously, he didn't stick to that, ended up getting addicted, and it ruined his life. I covered this story in my last Strange, Creepy and Mysterious Things episode, so feel free to watch that if you want a more in-depth summary. Thankfully, he's doing much better now and has been clean for 11 years. In 2019, there was a post on the Too Afraid to Ask subreddit titled, "12 mysterious and identical stores open on my street. What could be happening?" Opie said they live just outside of a big city, and after many retail businesses closed down, 12 very similar stores opened, selling expired food products, with strange staff who stared at Opie while they were shopping. Theories range from money laundering to human trafficking, but after a few replies clarifying some details, Opie never posted again, leaving many questions unanswered. I have a video on this one too, under the Opie's username, IcemanThrowaway123. "I Was in a Cult" was the title of a confession post in which Opie explained that they met a very enthusiastic man, Bob, who invited them to attend a summer camp for vulnerable teenagers. When they got there, they were physically examined, and when the time came to eat, they had to pray to the gods, even though Opie didn't realise it was a religious camp. After they'd gone to bed, another group leader, Todd, came into their room, told them all to stand up, and said they had to go to sleep in the tracksuits they had been given, not their boxers. Opie took part in some fun activities, but described the group leaders as very strict and weird, and there were some strange rules. Boys and girls weren't allowed to talk to each other, they had to wear their tracksuits while swimming, and they weren't allowed to call home at all during the 5-week stay. They were told that when the 5 weeks were up, they could choose to stay and invite their families to live there too. At one point, Opie snuck off and found a phone to call their mum, who said she'd pick them up straight away. As they were looking for their suitcase, Todd caught them and dragged them into the hallway, shouting at them for disobeying the rules. Everyone was rounded up, reminded of the rules, and sent to bed without dinner. Opie managed to find their phone before Todd caught them, and when they received a text from their dad saying they were outside, they ran and got into the car, the group leaders chasing after them, saying they weren't allowed to leave because the parents signed a contract saying they couldn't leave until the 5 weeks are up. OP managed to get away with their parents, but the next morning, Todd and some of the other leaders showed up at their house. They wouldn't leave until the police were called, but they were still hanging around even after. And when OP next left the house alone, Todd and others surrounded them in the street. Hearing a commotion, neighbours came outside and a fight started, resulting in the police showing up and the group being arrested. The next week, a new group showed up though, which eventually caused OP to have to move house. The family had to start a whole new life and use fake identities to prevent the group from finding them. The college stopped funding the group when they found out what was going on, and an investigation was launched, though OP doesn't seem to know the conclusion, only that Todd took his own life while on bail. If that all wasn't scary enough, OP's final comment read, "This is not true. I was part of a therapy group that specialises in helping teenagers with mental health problems. It was not a cult. Since then I have decided to rejoin the group. I will answer no further questions on this matter." So did the group catch up with them and force them to rejoin, or was it all a fictional story? I'll let you decide. 8 years ago, a Redditor was using an app to track and record their sleep, and one night when they played back the recording, they noticed some very strange clicking noises. In the recording, which was linked in the thread, OP can be heard saying, "What are you doing?" and a voice replies, "Nothing." Then later, something that sounds like, "That's them." OP doesn't remember being awake and saying anything that night, and they didn't recognise the other voice. It wasn't their own or their 3-year-old son's, and no one else was in the house, at least that they were aware of. They never heard any more voices after that and eventually moved house. Theories ranged from ghosts to an intruder, and honestly it's anyone's guess. I wonder if the unidentified voice was actually the son and it was somehow distorted by the app or something. That's my best guess anyway. Datura is a plant from the nightshade family that is sometimes taken recreationally for its strong hallucinogenic properties, though it is extremely dangerous because it's poisonous, so easy to overdose on. User Flip and Flop decided to try it for the first time and asked Reddit how much they should take. Many warned them not to do it at all, but they'd already bought the plant, so it was too late to turn back now. Their next comment was hours later and read, "Google.com, how normal again, stop now." Hours after that, Flip and Flop made their final comment on a mammoth fighting animation. "Please, these big dog are fighting, nah, okay." This indicated the trip was not over yet, and the fact that they were never heard from again led some to wonder if they took too much Datura and died. Carl Herald was a YouTuber who uploaded technology and programming tutorials. He was well known on Reddit as Carl H and had gained a good reputation as a helpful teacher, even offering direct lessons on Skype, which led to him being selected as Redditor of the Day at one point. Suddenly, he vanished from the internet and no one had any idea why, until articles began popping up about a Carl Herald that had been arrested on charges related to CP, as well as assault of a child. Much to Reddit's surprise, it turned out this man was in fact the Carl H that so many had known and loved, or at least thought they knew. Carl denied the allegations, but the evidence was stacked against him, and before the trial, he took his own life. In 2016, a post on the Creepy subreddit titled, "Got a notification from my smartphone app in the middle of the night saying, 'Your doorbell detected a visitor,' was accompanied by a photo of a creepy-looking individual. The quality isn't perfect, so it's a bit hard to make out whether the person is wearing a mask or not. All I know is I'd be shitting myself if I saw that in the middle of the night." Alana Pierce is a gaming journalist and YouTuber who was stalked by a Reddit user, Daryl Pratt. It started on YouTube where she would receive many comments from this person, and she replied to some until he started getting a bit too creepy and seemed to take a disliking to the fact that she had her eyebrows tattooed, then became even more bitter when she got a boyfriend. He started messaging her on Facebook and his account got banned, so he made another and continued before moving on to Reddit. He made a post asking if he could get into legal trouble for sending a girl love letters and explained that he had followed this girl for over a year and didn't realise why she stopped replying to him. He genuinely didn't seem to understand that his obsessive behaviour was inappropriate. His final comments on that account implied that he planned to take his own life, and his fate after that isn't known for sure. An obituary was found for a Daryl Prater who died in 2017, but other posts thought to be made by him since the last ones on Reddit have been found elsewhere online that suggest he moved on from his obsession with Alana. None of these posts were after the date of the obituary, though it's not clear if that really was him or not. In 2016, a user who went by the name 9mother 9horse 9eyes 9 began posting comments in random threads around the site and occasional self-posts which didn't make much sense if read individually. Each one could have been passed off as an accidental copy and paste from a book, but when read in order they told a coherent story. I haven't read it all, but if you check out the subreddit dedicated to it, they have a link to all the posts. I'm not going to say much about this one because it's even worse than the Swamps of Dagobah story, but it's a nurse's story of a very morbidly obese patient that lost a baby but didn't realise she was pregnant. From the title, I think you can probably fill in the blanks, but if not, I'd recommend checking out Wang's video on it. Quantum immortality is the idea that the consciousness stays alive even after the body dies. Around 5 years ago, a Reddit user became so obsessed with this theory that it drove them to, quote, a state of pure anxiety and terror because they were so scared of being alive against their will and didn't want to live forever. They posted in various science-related subreddits trying to find a good enough argument to suggest it's not true, but in the end they didn't seem totally convinced and announced that they planned to take their own life because it was all too much. They stopped posting soon after. Here's another piece of Nickelodeon lost media that's even more mysterious than The Butcher, if OP remembers correctly. They were watching Nickelodeon when they saw a weird scene where hundreds of naked people in a zombie-like state were walking in a line towards some giant hamster wheels. The scene kept repeating itself and OP changed the channel, before on second thoughts wondering what on earth they'd just watched. When they changed it back to Nickelodeon, SpongeBob was on mid-episode. They've never been able to figure out what they saw or why it seemed to be on that channel. It's possible that they were mistaken and it wasn't on Nickelodeon, though they did check the other channels at the time and weren't able to find it at all after changing the channel initially. For some reason out. There is a chance that they fell asleep and dreamt that, then woke up to SpongeBob though. A Redditor claimed to have once met a strange man named Jimmy C, who sat between him and his girlfriend at a bar, even though the rest of the bar was empty. He started moving his fingers over the bar top as if they were skating, something OP often did as a child. Jimmy looked at him and said, "I notice you're a man who pays attention to detail. I'm also a man who pays attention to detail." Then he started talking about OP's girlfriend, how beautiful she was and how OP should pay more attention to her, which obviously made them both a bit uncomfortable, and so OP told her to leave. At this point, he had the feeling that Jimmy wasn't human. Then Jimmy said, "You were supposed to go fishing today. If you had, I would have drowned you in that ocean." He began speaking in a different language, and OP, surprised by his own calmness, asked him to talk in a way that he could understand. Jimmy told him he'd jumped off the San Francisco Bridge many years ago, and that we, whoever that was, had been watching him. He bought OP drinks while he continued to say weird and creepy things, some indicating he knew personal details about OP, and when he decided to leave, Jimmy told him the next time he sees him, he'll be driving a black Mercedes. But it doesn't sound like OP saw him again, at least at the time they posted about this. Despite not believing in the supernatural, OP and his girlfriend believed they may have just met a demon, maybe even the devil. Lady Iris was a very depraved user who often posted on the Morbid Questions subreddit, asking very graphic questions related to murder, animal abuse, and other atrocities. She wasn't just curious though, and felt strong urges to commit these acts. She claimed to have actually killed a cat at one point, and didn't seem sure that she could control her urges and prevent herself from doing it again, and maybe even killing a human. She failed to understand why these things were morally wrong, so while she enjoyed her freedom and didn't want to go to prison, if the opportunity presented itself, it sounds like she would have murdered without remorse. I uploaded a video on Lady Iris a few months ago which goes into much more detail. In a confession post titled, "I'm on the internet right now. I'm born, brought up, and live in a cult, so this is confession worthy," OP didn't really give too many details away, but said they were supposed to be marketing products at the time, and instead decided to access Reddit using incognito because one of their mothers checks the search history every night. If they found out, OP said they would not be left with much freedom and would be punished, possibly with a serious beating. They were 19 years old and implied that they weren't necessarily looking for a way out, they just wanted company. Still, other users tried to offer advice on how they could leave, and sent links to cult recovery resources. Long periods of time would often pass between OP's posts, but they actually posted as recently as 6 months ago, and it seems that they might have left the cult. They said they were safe at least. Around a year ago, they said they had moved, had been working part-time, and had counselling, so hopefully they were able to work through whatever happened to them. In 2015, a user posted on a subreddit dedicated to Lyme disease, saying that the disease had ruined her life, and she was experiencing depression, vision problems, memory loss, and brain fog. She worried her daughter was displaying symptoms too. Her doctor didn't exactly seem to be helping and was prescribing her herbal medicine rather than antibiotics, but there wasn't another in the area, so she felt stuck. Some users suggested that the doctor was scamming her and that she might not actually have Lyme disease at all, as her symptoms didn't match those commonly associated with it. This would cause her to become defensive, and she claimed it was because she had congenital Lyme disease. She later mentioned other symptoms she was experiencing: hallucinations, extreme vertigo, paralysis, and psychotic episodes. Her mental state seemed to deteriorate as she began posting bizarre conspiracy theories and eventually just incoherent phrases. At one point, she repeatedly titled threads, "God entered into my body, like a body my same size," which is the same line that Bob Hickman often says. That's a whole other rabbit hole in itself. After all this, she stopped posting, and some wondered if she may have died from her symptoms or taken her own life, as she mentioned before. In 2019, a user was able to make contact with her sister, and at the time she was alive, but in hospital after harming herself. Her whereabouts since aren't publicly known. A post on the legal advice subreddit in 2015 read, "My wife has not returned home since she went out shopping late Saturday. It's getting to the point where I should call the police to file a missing persons report. I would like to be as helpful as possible when speaking to the police, but want to avoid triggering any suspicions about me. I hear a lot of stories of husbands being falsely accused when something happens. Should I only give them information in response to specific questions? Is there anything I should not bring up? I'm planning on contacting the police tomorrow morning. I can't postpone much longer as I'm getting messages asking about her and don't want to say anything to her friends or family until I file the report first. I now realise that I should have talked to her friends and family first, but at this point I don't want to explain why I didn't file a report yet." Yeah, it kinda sounds like OP might have killed his wife and is now trying to cover his tracks. Even if that's not the case, who gets more worried about themselves looking suspicious than the fact their wife has been missing for over 2 days? User Cyprol decided to perform self-surgery on herself because her cheeks were too chubby for her helmet to fit comfortably. She removed the fat pads from her cheeks and even put it on toast and ate it after, posting photos of the process as proof. Feel free to check out my video on this from a few months ago. This post has been removed and I wasn't able to find an archive of it, but the title is pretty self-explanatory. I, 27 female, think I just caught my nephew, 18 male, trying to record me in the bathroom. She commented an update explaining that she told her partner, who was furious, and his sister would be coming over the next day to discuss it. It was a throwaway account, so there are no other posts that might indicate what happened in the end. One time, when a Redditor stayed at a hotel that he often visited, he was surprised when his friend was given a room that was very different to any they'd ever seen before. It had a chain holding the bed to the wall, pictures of skulls and other strange artwork, and what looked like concrete floors. When they asked at the front desk, the receptionist told them that the room wasn't supposed to be rented, and Uppy's friend was given a new room. Theories range from the room being a dungeon to it being related to the Skull and Bones Society, which sounds like some kind of Illuminati organisation. Hankstank is a now deleted subreddit that was basically a community for girls. They exchanged photos of babies and teenagers and general gore, shared legal advice on what to do if your computer is seized by the police, discussed effective poisons, debated whether kidnapping should be legal, and many other disturbing topics. Yet another r/confession post here. This one was awarded over 100 times. A father tells the story of how he caught his son, who is basically Kevin from the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin, standing over his baby daughter's cot with a steak knife in his hand, having already cut her in 2 places. Without a second thought, Opie's wife began beating her son and almost killed him. Needless to say, after this incident and the years of trying to deal with his violent and out-of-control behaviour, they were done with him. This happened decades ago, and Opie hasn't seen his son since he left after the incident. He hopes his son overcame his demons, but if he stayed the same, he hopes someone killed him. The OP of a post titled "My Hills Have Eyes" moment in Texas was driving through an area that they weren't familiar with and decided to stop off at a gas station to fill up and to ask directions. The man working there told her where to go and said the road to the highway was around 17 miles long, which didn't sound right to her. OP had a gut feeling that something wasn't right and decided to try and find her own way rather than follow his directions. She ended up asking another man she came across, who told her it was actually less than a mile to the highway, and the route the shop assistant gave her led to a dead end in the desert. There was only a few trailers and mobile homes out there, which happened to be inhabited by a family of troublemakers, alcoholics and drug addicts, one of whom was the shop assistant. God knows what could have happened to her if she followed his directions. Another terrifying story for us ladies here. Amanda was looking for a house share and found an ad on Craigslist offering a room to females only for a low price. The occupant was a 23-year-old college student and seemed like the perfect roommate on paper. There was only one photo of the house though, and Amanda wanted to check it out before making any commitments, so she arranged with the occupant to visit at 8 PM one night. When she arrived, there was a note on the door telling her to go around the back, and when she knocked on the back door, a man in his 40s opened it, claiming to be the landlord. He said the occupant was working late and had asked him to meet Amanda. She entered the house and alarm bells started ringing. There was no furniture, the front door had a plank of wood nailed to it. The landlord was rushing her around and didn't like the lights being on for too long, and he wouldn't show her one of the rooms at all, claiming it was the occupant's. Just as she was about to leave, the landlord says he forgot to show her the basement. When he opened the door, it blocked her exit route, but she didn't really want to go down into the pitch black basement. Luckily, a car pulled up outside as she received a text, so she used that as an excuse to get out of there and sped home, contacting police as soon as she could. Turns out the man who introduced himself as the landlord did live there, but he was basically squatting. And in the basement there was a pile of blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. There was a fishing wire across the stairs at shin level, so had Amanda not thought so quickly, it seems like she would have fallen down there and probably never made it back out. In basically every Ask Reddit post asking about iconic Reddit moments, this one is always somewhere near the top. OP lived alone and was finding strange notes in her apartment in someone else's handwriting, but there was no sign of a break-in. After finding a note that said, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you, but it's important we do," she became suspicious of her landlord. She set up cameras, but no one had entered her apartment. A comment suggested that OP get a carbon monoxide detector, especially if she was getting bad headaches, which she confirmed she was. In an update post, she revealed that she had carbon monoxide poisoning and had left the notes herself without realising. If you head over to r/Halifax and search The Glove Man, you'll find many stories about a man dressed in a leather jacket and gloves who literally drives around the area giving drunk men lifts home and having them try on leather gloves. Yeah, that sentence could have ended a lot worse, but it's all a bit creepier than it initially sounds. He may or may not be a glove salesman, but he certainly seems to have a thing for gloves and men trying them on. Some say he offered them drugs, others claim he subtly propositioned them, and many said they felt like they were going to get killed or at least mugged before he finally dropped them off. His behaviour is certainly inappropriate and must have really scared anyone who got into his car, though thankfully I haven't come across any claims that he actually harmed anyone. A Redditor posted a panoramic photo they'd taken while at their family's cabin. It showed their cousin sitting in an armchair and a stranger could be seen through the window standing outside. It wasn't a family member, and OP said that there were tracks leading from the woods around the cabin to the spot where the person was standing. For OP's 21st birthday, her boyfriend's mum had arranged for them all to meet up at a bar. They both packed up a few blocks away from the bar and were waiting to cross the road when they encountered a very strange girl who started following them, getting way too close to OP while skittishly looking around. When the boyfriend's mum asked what she was doing, she said, "It's not safe," and looked OP straight in the eyes. The girl ended up following them not just to the bar but inside and sat very close to them. Each time OP looked away and looked back at her, she had moved closer. They tell the bouncer and he asks her to leave, which she does after arguing with him, and stood outside staring at OP through the open patio for about 15 minutes. OP even included photos in the post, albeit low quality ones. Sometime in 2008, when OP was 19, the dad got a cable TV and a transmitter and receiver so OP could watch it in his room without having to get a new box. When they set it up though, they saw a bed on the TV screen, suggesting it was picking up a camera signal. They soon recognised the neighbour and thought the camera was probably set up by one of them to try to catch the other cheating or something. That wasn't until they saw a plumber, who at one point looked right into the camera and moved it around, suggesting it was him that put it there. They told the neighbours, who had no idea, and it turned out the plumber had not only planted the camera, but was hanging around outside in his car every night watching the family on his laptop. A few years ago, a Redditor posted on the legal advice subreddit asking for advice because she thought her boyfriend, who was a doctor, was drugging her. She had noticed gaps in her memory that always seemed to happen after she went on dates with him, even when she had nothing to drink. When she'd wake up the next morning, things had clearly happened between them the night before, but she had no recollection of it. She decided to break up with him, but before she could actually do it, she found herself on another date with him, though couldn't remember how she got there, even though her car was in the car park. She ended up staying at his for 3 days and didn't black out at all, so started to trust him again, until he mentioned some red bumps on her thigh that she thought were needle injection marks. This almost ended with a similar kind of twist to the Post-it note story when a commenter suggested OP check for bed bugs, and she replied saying she found evidence of them. However, a mod commented saying they'd been contacted by a physician who claimed that bed bugs cannot cause the symptoms OP described and that she should visit a doctor. I'm not about to read through all 247 comments right now to find it, but I do remember when I first heard about this post. There was a theory that the boyfriend might have actually been the one to suggest the bedbug theory to cover his own tracks, but that obviously wasn't proven, and OP never updated the post after that. A Redditor and 2 of their friends were hiking near a waterfall and decided to go bouldering around the bottom. They came across a 22-year-old woman face down in the mud with broken legs and no food, water or phone to call for help. Thankfully she was still alive, though her friend wasn't so lucky and was found dead close by. She attempted to go for help but didn't make it far, so had the group not come across the first woman when they did, she too would have likely met the same fate as her friend. Before they found the women, they took photos while they were climbing and noticed after that the woman who was still alive is actually in the photos. When user Blue Black Jupiter moved into a new apartment, she noticed her neighbour, who lived directly above her, was acting very strangely and seemed to be following her around from their apartment. She always heard their footsteps right above her, sometimes deliberately stomping. OP posted a video as proof, as well as a photo of a bottle of bleach that was left on her doorstep, which she believed might have been a racist threat. She checked everywhere for hidden cameras and found nothing. Presumably, she never figured out what was going on as she never posted again. Again, I have a whole video on this one, I'll leave a link in the description. A couple of years ago, a Reddit user was desperate to get a very dark secret off their chest. They used to sell drugs for a short time, including 2 that could easily be mixed up. A few days after they sent out some orders, they were contacted by someone who claimed their friend died from what OP had sold them. OP checked their stash and it turns out that they got the two drugs mixed up and accidentally distributed the wrong one. They realised their mistake and knew instantly that they'd almost definitely killed people, albeit unintentionally. A Google search of their names later confirmed this for 4 of their customers, one of whom had shared it with a friend and they both died. OP backed out of the game as soon as they realised their mistake, moved away and basically became a recluse. This is a really awful situation all round because they obviously didn't mean to kill anyone and clearly felt really bad about it after, but the consequences of their mistake are huge and there's nothing they could do to put it right. A woman asked members of the legal advice subreddit what to do after someone contacted child services because her husband and father of her baby had been arrested for possession of marijuana 11 years earlier. They both passed drug tests, nothing suspicious or incriminating was found on either of them or in their home, yet their caseworkers still said there was a chance their baby could be taken from them. The top comment was from a former CPS investigator who thought there was something very off about the whole situation. OP posted an update in which she revealed that she contacted a lawyer, and it turned out that the caseworker actually had no affiliation with child services and was likely trying to kidnap the baby. The police were apparently taking the case seriously, so let's hope they prevented them from actually going through with any kidnapping. Most of the posts in this iceberg are from at least a few years ago, but this one happened only around 10 months ago. OP lived with their dad and had been hearing noises coming from the attic for some time, as well as noticing other strange occurrences like missing food. One day they left the computer on YouTube and when they returned it now showed a European food website that they linked in the post. OP suffered with visual and auditory hallucinations, so wondered if that could explain some of the odd happenings, but when their friend came to stay while the dad was away, they heard the noises too. They both decided to leave the house for the night, and when they returned the next day, food was missing from the fridge and there were even used dishes in the sink. At a later date, a neighbour told OP that they'd seen 2 people climbing over the garden fence while OP was away, which all but confirmed to them that there had been someone living in the attic. You might be wondering why they didn't just call the police when it seemed pretty obvious that there was someone else in the house, or why whoever was supposedly living in the attic would leave such obvious clues. Well, the plot thickened around a month ago when another user took it upon themselves to debunk the post and suggested that it was a fake story posted by a marketing company to promote the website that OP had linked in the post. This theory isn't 100% proven, but it certainly makes sense. I don't know what subreddit this was on, or when, or how people reacted in the comments, as the creator of this iceberg only linked the screenshots. But a 32-year-old man wanted advice on how to tell his 24-year-old co-worker that she was in an abusive relationship, even though he had next to no reason to think that and likely just wanted a relationship with her himself. His reasons for thinking this were that the co-worker didn't tell him about her boyfriend straight away. At a work fundraising gala, she spoke with him on the phone, then said she'd be leaving early, and he showed up not dressed for the occasion, and that's pretty much it. OP adamantly denies being romantically interested in her, but he's so invested in her relationship and lacks the self-awareness to realise how creepy he sounds. She decided she wanted nothing to do with him outside work, but that didn't deter his weird fixation. A 22-year-old woman realised her partner was acting off when he started leaving fruit in the garden, which he said was for the mice that had been living in the shed, and when he suddenly started being overly nice to her by cooking and baking for her all the time. She just thought he was being nice, but she sometimes felt sick or dizzy after eating. A friend of her boyfriend came into the cafe she worked at and told her that he'd been collecting slugs and putting them in her food. When she confronted him, he accused her of snooping through his messages and tried to pass it off as a joke, which is obviously crazy. God knows what his motives were, but the worst part was, OP was questioning if she overreacted. I really hope she got out of there and never saw him again. Dr. Ramsey is the name of a man who began stalking a Redditor and her family when she was 9 years old. He more than likely wasn't a doctor, though posed as one to try to gain her trust, which failed. Over a period of 18 months, he called her home phone and showed up at her house countless times, even making an appearance outside her school and pretending to be her dad in an attempt to pick her up. The police couldn't really do anything because the laws on stalking weren't as serious as they are today, even though Dr. Ramsey had made serious threats in the phone calls. He suddenly stopped and they never heard from him again, and a small part of OP wonders if that might have been down to her dad, who she once found sitting in the kitchen in the dark with a gun, waiting for him. Jake3572 is the username of Jake Davison, a 22-year-old man who shot and killed 5 people and injured 2 others, before taking his own life in Plymouth, UK in August 2021. Not long before the incident, he had made various questionable comments related to inceldom and the black pill on Reddit, including ones that implied a hatred towards women, including his own mother. He also posted about his mental health problems, which he believed held him back in life. His account was soon suspended and only limited archives remain, but there are enough to get a glimpse into his mind before he made such an unforgivable decision. User Snapped Fingers has a worrying post history, to say the least, showing that they were suffering with some serious mental health problems. They had auditory and visual hallucinations and harmed themselves in quite extreme ways on more than one occasion. They became obsessed with the idea of interdimensional beings, and not only thought that there was a portal to hell in the Paris catacombs, but that it was their job to close it down. They planned the trip to Paris and kept Reddit updated throughout, until their final post on the 7th of May 2020 titled, "We'll be entering the catacombs in a few hours-ish." Considering it's recommended that people only explore the catacombs with an experienced guide, because navigating is difficult and people have gone missing in there before, it seems likely that if OP wasn't trolling, they went into the catacombs and never came back out. A Redditor was living and working on a farm property for a few months when they noticed around 25 to 30 low-strength Wi-Fi networks coming from underneath a concrete pad that they were told was only covering gravel and dirt. He used a thermal imaging camera and realised that the precise area was significantly hotter than the surrounding concrete. OP drilled holes through that part of the pad and tried pouring water down. I don't know how he dared, to be honest. In a comment, he revealed that his boss had been selling faulty electronics on eBay for strange prices, and the buyer feedback would include phrases like "no fakes" and "very happy kids," which led him to wonder if he stumbled across a human trafficking or paedophile ring. Unfortunately, neither of his 2 posts about this gained much traction, and if he ever figured out what was really going on, he decided against making an update post. Having reason to suspect your partner is cheating on you with anyone is bad enough, but this poor guy believed his girlfriend might have been cheating with her own dad. He doesn't have much evidence, but I guess in situations like this, it doesn't take that much for you to feel like something just isn't right. Her dad came to stay for a few days, and each night when they were ready for bed, the girlfriend would go to chat with her dad in private for a while, sometimes waiting until she thought OP was asleep. OP thought he heard noises one night, but he didn't just want to barge in case he was wrong. The original post was deleted and I couldn't find an archive of an update. However, 2 years later, OP made a comment on a totally unrelated earphone giveaway post that gave us the answer we didn't want but needed. I don't post much on Reddit, but when I do, it's either to discuss my incestual cheating now ex-girlfriend or a chance to win the XTZ Earphone 12 earphones. The relationship subreddits really are goldmines when it comes to crazy stories. In this one, a woman suspected her husband was spying on her while he went on business trips. He seemed to know what was going on when he wasn't there, like a friend's dog dying, which she had a phone conversation about before he got back, and when she got home, even though she planned to be out later and told him that. When she tried searching for a camera while he was out, but pretending she was just looking for things, he called her to ask her what she was doing. Perhaps she was just paranoid and there's a reasonable explanation for it all, but if I had to bet money, I'd say the husband is suspicious as hell and probably hid a camera somewhere. Over 10 years ago, back when you could actually make a full post on Ask Reddit, not just a question in the title, one user asked what to do with a film reel they found inside a condom, I hope it wasn't used, behind a public toilet in a bad part of a big city. Funnily enough, the top comment read, "You should wait till this thread gets really big and then never provide an ending to the story. That's how things are done around here." And that's basically what OP did. They hung around to answer a few questions, said that that type of film can't be developed in drugstore type facilities, and was never heard from again. The man didn't even have the decency to tell us he felt like he was being watched or that someone was following him before he vanished. This story comes from the comments of an Unresolved Mysteries post asking, "What is your personal unresolved mystery?" OP was hiking in 2008 when they came across an odd couple in their 40s, dressed in all white, looking dishevelled. OP said hello, but they ignored them. When OP camped that night, they left food up a tree in case a bear came, and the next morning the food had gone, but there were no bear tracks, only boot prints. The next night, they'd left sticks around the campfire so they'd wake up if anyone was around, which they were, and OP heard whispering that suddenly stopped. A few days after that, 50 to 75 miles away from where they first encountered the couple, they saw them again. The nearest town was 25 miles away, and OP tried to cover as much of that distance as possible, but eventually had to set up camp and get some rest. After a few hours in the tent, they heard footsteps and whispering again, and a flashlight lit up the whole tent, so they got out with a knife in their hand and started shouting. They heard footsteps running towards the tent and caught a glimpse of a figure in their peripheral vision, so made a run for it and after 5 minutes hid by a tree. Thankfully, the couple never found them again and they were able to make it to the town the next day and report it to the police, though nothing ever came of it. Another user believed they may have encountered the couple too, and their friend was worried about them following them, but it doesn't sound like they actually did. When OP was 16 and lived in an apartment complex, she was walking her dog one day when she came across a man in his 30s just stood there on the path, doing nothing but staring at her. She tried to make small talk as she passed, but he said nothing. Next thing she knew, she was inside, entering her apartment, with no memory of what happened between seeing the man and where she was now. 3.5 years later, she moved back to the complex with her fiancé, and one day while taking out the rubbish, she saw the man again, wearing the same coat, this time angrily talking on an old phone while staring right at her. She started heading back in and he suddenly started walking towards her and snapped the phone into pieces. OP blacked out again, and when she woke up, hours had passed and she was in hospital. Nearly a year later, she heard a knock on the door, went to answer it, and guess who it was? She woke up an hour and a half later in different clothes, with the heating on full and blood on the floor. Nothing had been stolen. This is definitely a terrifying story, and I would have said it was probably just that, a story. However, some comments pointed out that she may have been having seizures, which would explain the time lost. Her seeing the man could have been her brain communicating with her that she was about to have one. The only thing that wouldn't fit with that is that after the phone incident, the broken phone was still in the car park, though it looked like it had been run over. It's possible OP saw the phone beforehand and unconsciously fabricated the story to explain it though. Aoki mum, real name April Beaver, was a Redditor who was murdered by her 2 sons in 2015. She had 7 children in total and would often talk about them on Reddit or give advice to others about raising kids in general. The sons not only killed her, but their dad too and 3 of their siblings, and they apparently planned to commit many more murders, at least 50, because they wanted to be famous. Prior to the murders, they had apparently stockpiled weapons, and one of their sisters was concerned about this, but the mother nonchalantly said, "That's just what boys do." This entry refers to a user who called themselves Homicidal Murderer backwards. They've been posting since 2008, mostly about their artwork. In fact, their first post was titled, "I am 54 years old, never married, rent a small room and nothing brings me joy except my art. My best is far from good. Since I have no one to share it with, let me share it with you." And the majority of their posts after that are the same thing, only the age changes over the years and they attach a photo with different artwork each time. They used to post quite frequently, at least once a month and sometimes multiple times each month, but it became less and less often, and the last time he posted was in October 2019, which seems to be the longest gap in his post history so far. That was their 99th post with that title, and they were 64 years old at the time. In an Ask Reddit thread, a comment told the story of what happened when a young girl had a doctor's appointment because there was a really strong and foul smell radiating from her. She was suffering with an ED, and let's just say she had been hiding food in a place that food shouldn't go. I'm putting this forward for one of the greatest moments in Reddit history. It almost makes up for every single time that OP didn't deliver. In 2018, a user posted a photo on the WTF subreddit with the title, "I found a homemade electric chair while exploring an abandoned building in Croatia." After user Anon72C pointed out that the current from a car battery can't hurt you, someone replied telling him to try connecting it to his nipples or balls, then tell them again that the current can't hurt. Anon replied, "You know what, Admiral Awesome, I'm sick and tired of armchair experts and bullshitting naysayers. Fine." And he did it. Well, he didn't have a car battery, but he used a laboratory power supply and posted pics of his balls hooked up to it. He reported a mild and almost pleasant tingling sensation and said the most painful part was attaching the alligator clips. This post has been removed and I couldn't find an archive, but the title reads, "I, 30 female, found a hidden journal of my husband, 30 male, of 4 years and think he has some kind of disturbing obsession with women." And the comments imply he had some kind of diary where he'd write down descriptions of women. He'd started writing in it 4 months ago, and it's possible that wasn't his first. There was a post on the legal advice subreddit where a man described what happened when a girl came back to his after a date, having made it clear that she was only interested in a hookup. When she got there, she didn't seem into it though, and soon said she wanted to leave. He didn't listen to this and reminded her of her promise, and things ended up happening. She left while he was in the shower after, then the police showed up and arrested him. He really didn't understand what he'd done wrong and asked, "How do I not go to jail forever because of some crazy sensitive person who read the situation wrong?" I Love Roach, username definitely checks out, made a post on the TIFU subreddit in which he explained that since he was a teenager, he became obsessed with cockroaches and conjured up an imaginary friend called Ogtha that was kind of a cross between a cockroach and a human. He could only perform in the bedroom while thinking about Ogtha and made the mistake of telling his girlfriend that he imagines she is Ogtha while they're getting busy. Predictably, she didn't take it well and wasn't returning OP's texts. The most ridiculous part was when OP said he doesn't know how he'll face anyone if his secret got out, and that he feels guilty about feeling ashamed in case Ogtha will be saddened by it, even though he knows she's imaginary. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at this one. OP was a pregnant woman asking Reddit for advice about her husband and father-in-law's extremely concerning behaviour. The husband's mum died during childbirth, and ever since OP got pregnant, he and his dad seemed obsessed with the idea that she would die too. It started out with the husband asking her to make sure her life insurance is up to date and draft a will, which she thought was a bit intense but not too unreasonable, until he asked her to go through her belongings and separate what would be saved for the baby and what she'd be returning to her family if she died. She believes that the father-in-law wants her to die because he's built his whole life and personality around being a single dad and can't seem to wait to guide his son through it too. The story was posted using a throwaway account and there weren't any updates. Let's hope she got as far away from them as possible. Let's just keep this one short and shitty. OP found out his wife of 3 years was into poo stuff, reluctantly agreed to do his business on her, and she tried to eat it. 9 years ago, a woman in her 20s did an Ask Me Anything post relating to the fact that she'd been breastfed until the age of 15. Obviously that's pretty weird regardless, but she didn't seem to fully realise until an update years later how inappropriate her relationship with her mother was. This is one of the darkest pieces of Reddit history. In 2012, after a user noticed that they often saw posts asking sexual assault victims about their incidents, but none directed at the attackers, they had the bright idea to ask them to tell their stories. In addition to the fact that their actions were being condoned and minimised by other users, a psychologist highlighted that giving them a space to talk about it was allowing them to relive it, which obviously isn't a good thing. The thread was nuked by moderators and only a few comments remain, though there are articles about it online which show some of the deleted comments. Ted Bundy was a serial killer who confessed to 30 murders between 1974 and 1978, but likely committed many more. A Redditor's friend told them about their parents' first date, where they decided to go for a midnight hike up Provo Canyon. They started to get a bad feeling, but they ignored it and carried on, until he started walking into the trees and his foot hit something soft in the path. It was too dark to see what it was, but they weren't about to stick around to find out. Years later, they were watching an interview with Ted Bundy in which he recalled the time that he almost got caught after killing a girl up Provo Canyon. He heard some people coming up the trail, then a man walked right into the body, turned around and walked away. A Reddit user shared a very disturbed individual's Pastebin account, which featured various wildly inappropriate posts about the characters in Persona, a role-playing video game. They included very graphic fantasies and descriptions, and they seem to have been deleted at some point, either by the person who wrote them or the website itself, but you can find it on the Wayback Machine under the username Nyalco. 10 years ago, a Redditor did an Ask Me Anything post related to the inappropriate relationship he had with his twin sister and younger sister over a period of around 10 years until she got married. Interactions with his twin sister were much less frequent and ended sooner. 7 years after the first post, he did an update in which he revealed that the secrets had come out, both sisters' husbands had left them, and he was now living with his younger sister and their 2-year-old daughter. Opie and her husband would often let their dog out to do his business and have a quick wander if it's too late to take him for a walk. One night when Opie was home alone, she did this, and sometime after heard scratching on the door. She looked through the peephole and saw not her dog, but a man standing there staring at the door handle. She called her husband, and after a while, the man, as if he knew she was looking through the peephole, looked right at her and opened his mouth to show a quote, taunting malicious grin, before turning around and walking away. The husband returned to find the dog's lead had been cut, but thankfully they found him in a neighbour's yard. On an Ask Reddit thread titled, "What secret do you hide from your family and will take to your grave?" one user revealed how he ended up with his wife, Sarah. Basically, he saw her phone password one day and unlocked her phone to find messages between her and another guy, Jeff, as well as various nudes they sent each other. So he decided to create a fake profile, Vanessa, to blackmail them both to not speak to each other or their photos would be leaked. Eventually, OP managed to convince Sarah that Vanessa was actually Jeff, who was blackmailing her to pressure her into doing things with him, and so she stopped talking to him, and OP was the hero and the shoulder to cry on. 4 years later, they got married. It's kind of terrifying to think that something like that could happen to anyone and you'd probably never find out. A photo of a coffin was posted on the WTF subreddit with the title, "I came home to this in my driveway. I don't want to touch it." OP opened it to find a key and a handwritten note with coordinates on. Someone went to the coordinates and it turned out to be a cemetery. They took photos and shared them but didn't find anything noteworthy. It's certainly creepy, but was probably just an attempt at an ARG or viral marketing or something, or OP just made up the whole thing for internet points. Unfortunately, this is another post that was removed and I couldn't find an archive for, but from the title and comments, it seems that OP found lots of photos of dissected animals and bits of fur or hair on her dad's computer, hidden in a folder with an inconspicuous name. And another that's been deleted. It was titled, "I, 14 male, have scars on my back. It literally says H.K. as if someone cut me. My family is acting really awkward." From the title alone, it sounds like he was probably abused somehow when he was younger, and many of the comments suggest the same, though they don't provide any more details on the context of the post. When OP was a teenager, they found some weird items buried under a tree near their fort in Ziploc bags, including what they described as yellow/white crust, as well as old family photos and not safe for work printouts. Another time, they found a new bag filled with certain bodily fluids and more family photos. They started to leave the area when a man in his 40s walked that way, then entered the fort. They waited a while but had to go past there to get home, and when they looked in, the man exposed himself. They were able to make it home and reported it to the police, but nothing came of it, and a few years later, the area was burned down. A few months ago, a Reddit user made a post on the Confessions subreddit about how they murdered their sister 17 years ago. She was 2.5 and OP was 5 at the time, and they were often left in the bath together alone for short periods of time while their mother, who was a single parent, tended to the youngest baby. OP was always told never to let their sister's head go under the water because she could drown and would be gone forever. One day, OP was very annoyed at their sister for ripping up one of their books, and when they were in the bath, they remembered what their mum had said, that the sister would be gone forever if her head went underwater. OP, obviously not truly understanding the gravity of that, was so mad that she decided to do it to teach her a lesson, and ended up actually killing her. Police came but didn't take action because OP was so young, though her grandparents stopped talking to them and their mother. OP has seriously suffered with their mental health since then, and it doesn't sound like they'll ever forgive themselves. They believe they should have been punished more than they were, and basically feel like they've ruined their mother's life. Murder at that age could be a red flag when paired with other questionable behaviour, but judging by how bad OP has felt ever since then, to the point they've tried to take their own lives, it was clearly an isolated incident of a child not understanding the consequences of their actions until it was too late. I hope one day they're able to move on with their lives and live for their sister too. OP described herself as antisocial and lived alone in a small apartment where the landlord, Olivia, would leave food outside the door for her. After a while, she started noticing items that were misplaced, and there was always a strange odour in the air whenever she woke up. She felt drowsy often, but blamed it on the new medication she was on and didn't think too much of it at first. Things escalated to a point where she started to get really worried and decided to stay with her parents for a few days. Her dad went to check out her apartment and found writing all over the walls saying, "Come back, baby, please." Turned out Olivia's son had drugged the food and used the spare keys to get into OP's apartment every night to watch her sleep and touch her hair, among other things. He tried to make out they were in love to the police and said he had OP's permission, which obviously wasn't the case. This post was written by a father whose 29-year-old son had been sober for 18 months and he'd started community college later in the year. OP wasn't proud though, because since his son started shoplifting at the age of 15, he'd been nothing but trouble, to say the least. He got involved with gangs and took hard drugs, hung around with underage girls a few years later, and eventually stabbed and assaulted his mother, who later took her own life. A couple of years ago, he showed up pretending to be sorry with his auntie, who expected OP to give him another chance, and he slashed OP's tyres, threw a brick through the window, and drove off in her car. Can anyone really blame him for not wanting anything to do with his son? Yeah, you read that right. OP started dressing as a woman so he could go into women's toilets without arousing suspicion, then listen to or film them using the toilet without them noticing. It escalated to him turning off the water so the toilet wouldn't flush, then when they left, he'd waltz in and bag up their shit to take home with him. Confession time again. This is another depressing one. I accidentally killed 7 people. I put a rag in a new water heater exhaust to keep debris out and installed it in a rental. I get a call a week later, there's been an accident. I show up and there's a ton of EMs and police. They ask me where the gas shutoff is, and I go down to shut the gas off and see the end of the rag I forgot sticking out of the top of the heater. Ripped the rag out, shut the gas off, and head upstairs only to be told all the tenants were dead. I drink all day now and sleep. It's killing me from the inside every single day, but if I say anything, my family is ruined. We have a bunch of rental properties and we'd be shut down. OP has 4 kids under the age of 5, while her sister is happily married with no plans of having children. The sister often makes jokes about OP having kids, knowing some of them were accidents, and recently referred to the kids as livestock. OP decides to sabotage her sister's contraception as revenge, and she ends up getting pregnant. OP thinks it's hilarious and that her sister deserves it, and she stands by her actions when called out in the comments. A few years ago, a Redditor told the story of how he'd been playing a game on his computer with headphones on when he heard his wife crying downstairs and an unknown man's voice threatening her. He went downstairs to find the man assaulting his wife in front of his daughter, so he pulled him off her and shot him a couple of times, killing him. Thankfully, OP didn't face any legal consequences, but it took him a long time to recover, and he still can't wear noise-cancelling headphones without having a panic attack. His wife had an even worse time, and it sounds like she still hasn't fully processed it, though they were both still happily married at the time of the comment. Between the 22nd of February and the 10th of March 2017, user FujiTagIcon001 repeated one comment on various threads. I faced too serious problem of human right at FujiTagIcon, Thailand. Please help me. The only comment that was different was one that translated to, it is power harassment in the Gaikan, Thailand, which was F. There were some useless replies like, hang in there, and one person shared contact information for the relevant authorities on a few of their comments, but this user went by mostly unnoticed. Seems likely that they're a troll considering they never replied to anyone who tried to help, and they never gave any more information about their situation. The bridge is a pretty iconic Reddit mystery. OP lived in North Wales in the UK, and one night he and his friends went to explore inside a bridge next to some train tracks. They ended up finding some very disturbing things. A fold-away chair facing the wall which had a page torn from a magazine with a not safe for work image on it. But there was something sinister about it, and the woman's eyes had been carefully cut out of the page. After seeing her and blood, they nubbed the out of there, but decided to return to get some photos. The image on the wall had vanished, but there were other images on the floor, and the rest appeared to be untouched since they were there before. This story is very similar to the bridge and occurred when OP was 14. The friend found a cave but hadn't ventured in yet, so they decided to check it out together. There was rubbish everywhere, needles, a makeshift bed, adult toys, and a couple of photo albums, one of which had inappropriate photos of women and disfigured children. The other had photos of the Holocaust with a gooey substance on them. They got out of there and the friend later told them that they heard someone coughing and moving further down the cave, so it sounds like they got out of there at the right time. They told their parents, who called the police, but by the time they searched the place, only the rubbish remained, so nothing came of it. OP and his wife had an argument after they disagreed over the ending of Battlestar Galactica right before he went away on a business trip. It sounded like she was overreacting and didn't like that he had a different opinion to her, but she texted him to apologise while he was away. When he got back, she began acting off. She was waking up early to do things in the kitchen, only grunted at him when he tried to make conversation, and handed him a bag of lunch, which she had never done before, while saying, "It's cold out there, better hug you down." When he tried to ask her what she meant by that, she walked to the bathroom and slammed the door behind her. She'd act like it never happened later, and OP wondered if it was one of her weird jokes, until it kept happening and he thought she might be gaslighting him. In an update, OP said that he woke up that morning and the fridge had been cleared of food. His wife wasn't in the house and there was a bag with a note taped to it that read, "It's cold out there, better hug you down." Having previously heard his wife on the phone to her parents saying he was gaslighting her, he decided to head there to see if he could find her and figure out what was going on. When he arrived, his father-in-law opened the door, looking concerned and scared, and saying he'd been terrorising his daughter. OP was baffled until his wife showed him a video of him banging on the bathroom door, screaming at her to come out, and another of him just standing at the door before work, staring at nothing. Turned out he'd accidentally been taking a lot of his wife's medication and it sparked some kind of psychotic episode for him. It actually took him 2 days to get to his wife's parents' house and he didn't remember anything that he did in the videos. A few months ago, a Redditor posted on the TIFU subreddit trying to spread awareness of empty nose syndrome caused by nasal surgery. They wanted to fix a small bump on the nose and had found out through research that the turbinates, a network of bones, vessels and tissue, should not be touched. Despite her surgeon agreeing not to go anywhere near them, he did anyway, and 2 weeks later, OP lost all air sensation, meaning it feels like they're constantly being waterboarded, which causes panic attacks and insomnia. They explain how easy it is for nasal surgery to go wrong, say ENS is much more common than people think, and recommend against getting surgery unless it's necessary. And even then they say you should get it in writing that the surgeon won't touch your turbinates. Some users implied they believed that OP's symptoms may have been partly psychological, and having done some light research on ENS, it seems that the possibility of it being psychosomatic hasn't been ruled out, but barely any research at all has been done on it. It makes sense that damage to a physical part of the body would produce physical symptoms, so I doubt her symptoms would be totally psychological. Regardless, OP is clearly suffering, and there doesn't seem to be much hope for a cure for her. The Yarnell Hill fire was a wildfire that ignited on the 28th of June 2013 and burned until the 10th of July. It killed 19 firefighters, making it the 6th deadliest American firefighter disaster in history. A post about this was made on r/news, and someone made a comment that has since been deleted. I assume they made it clear that their stepdad was a fire chief named Jim Coyle, as a reply to their comment read, "You know who else can't sleep? The 3-year-old your stepdad buried alive and killed. Disgusting." Back in the 70s, Jim had hit and pushed his girlfriend's 3-year-old daughter, and she ended up hitting her head on the wall. He thought she was dead and so buried her, but when he admitted it later, police found her still alive. Tragically, she died the next day. It seems that the original commenter wasn't aware of this, as they replied 2 weeks later, starting with, "So it's been 2 weeks since you hit me with this. I thought I could come up with some eloquent retort, but nothing really formed. I'm left with this. It is clear that 40 years ago something tragic did happen. I can't deny that. He went on trial. This went through the courts and he got his punishment. Jim was in his 20s when that happened. He was a lowly EMT in a tiny town. He was not rich and didn't buy his way out of this. However the facts played out, the courts decided his fate. End of story. It is not your place in this society to keep trying him for the same crime. This is not an episode of America's Most Wanted." It sounds like the second commenter wasn't the only one talking about Jim's crime, as I found an article mentioning it and saying he announced he was resigning. Some residents in the area seem to think that Jim was actually at least partly responsible for the Yarnell Hill fire, though I don't think that was proven. OP is a self-proclaimed addict who, on the search for the next new and exciting thing the internet has to offer, ended up getting into maggots. A maggot ended up in his bladder and he now has what sounds like a very serious infection, though he doesn't want to go to the hospital because he's embarrassed about how it happened. He warned people against not only doing what he did, but letting an addiction get that far in the first place. Good advice, but he should also listen to the commenters and seek medical attention ASAP now he's already made the mistake. A post was made on the Let's Not Meet subreddit about a man that OP had been best friends with for 25 years. He went to a Christian college to be a teacher and was very professional and well put together, until a few months into his marriage when his wife asked if they could have an open marriage. His mental state began deteriorating and he argued with his wife about it for many years until he finally agreed to it. Suddenly, he came out as bi, began having multiple relationships that never lasted longer than a week or two, cut off his parents, saying they were too conservative and Christian, started talking about him and his wife being black magic practitioners. Basically, he turned into a totally different person, but things would soon take a dark turn. He said something very inappropriate about OP's sister, who was, quote, barely legal, and even said he was going to turn one of his students gay when he turned 18. He also said he was into inappropriate things with animals, and after OP found out that he traumatized one of his other friends in an unspecified way, he decided never to see him again. If this post is true, it's one of the worst things I've ever seen on Reddit, and that's saying something. OP is a, quote, active who uses his job as a child psychologist to get in contact with kids, and I don't need to explain the rest. He also has 2 daughters, one of whom he frequently has inappropriate contact with. He says are more common than you'd think, and it's easier to get away with than you'd think. Surely there has to be some way for authorities to track someone's IP address in an extreme situation like this. If so, I really hope they caught this monster. In an Ask Reddit thread about secrets that would ruin lives if it came out, a user revealed that when he was 10 or 11, he and his mate's daughter both liked each other, but his mother wouldn't allow him to associate with any of the attendants or their family. To cut a vile story short, he suggested she have inappropriate contact with one of their dogs, and she agreed, and took her own life a few weeks later. He ended the comment with, "To this day I still think that my juvenile mind could have caused the death of another person." In the comments of another similar Ask Reddit question, a user stated that they never spoke to their best friend again after she told them, while laughing, that she participated in a boot party that caused the death of a homeless man. OP, who is now a detective, told a story from when he'd recently become a cop. He and his colleague had been sent to a dispute at a bar that was pretty rough, to say the least, and they were waiting for a woman to come out of the toilets after they'd cleared everyone else out. She took a suspiciously long time, and when she finally opened up, she had a bulge in her pants that they thought might be a weapon. Turns out it was a baby. Well, that was a depressing note to end the iceberg on, but this whole thing has been a wild ride. I almost split this into 2 videos, but I hope you enjoyed the extra long one. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing and leaving your thoughts in the comments, plus any other disturbing posts that weren't on this iceberg. Huge thank you to my patrons, whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. And thanks to Hunter Killer for sponsoring this video. Remember to go to hunterkiller.com/internet investigators and use the code INTERNET for $10 off your order. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.